Hello and welcome to Dungeon. I'm your host Rob. Today we're going to be talking about the Dragon Ancestor Sorcerer. I figured last week we did the Evoker, which is one of the best blaster caster types in the game. So this week we take a look at their main source of competition, the Sorcerer. And I did Wild Magic a few weeks ago, so today we'll look at the Dragon Ancestor instead. Now, I don't want to get into which is better, the Evoker Wizard or the Dragon Ancestor. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, and we will cover some of those in this video. I'm also going to talk a little bit about meta magic, because I didn't really do that in the Sorcerer or in the Wild Magic Sorcerer video. So I'll cover it a bit in here. I don't want to do a ton on it, but I do think that meta magic really changes the way you can play your character. And it has a way of turning like decent spells into really good spells and really good spells into great spells. So it is definitely worth covering. I'm also going to talk about some multiclass builds towards the end, and that's just what I like to do. I love multiclassing personally. And sorcerers are particularly good at it because, charisma casters tend to complement each other very well. So right at level 1, you're going to get to choose your dragon bloodline. And basically it just corresponds with the dragons from the Mosh Manual, right? So if you're red or gold, you have fire. If black is acid and green is poison, etc. Blue is lightning, whatever. It's not really important at level 1. Oh, great, they're going to mow the lawn right now. That's perfect timing. Anyways, it doesn't matter much at level 1, but it will matter as you level up, because at level 6 you get an ability that adds your charisma bonus to all damage of the chosen type. So if you went with Red Dragon Ancestor, all your fire damage, you're going to be able to add your charisma bonus to it. You also get the ability called Draconic Resilience. Oh yeah, so you can also read, write, and speak Draconic, and if you're interacting with dragons, you get double your proficiency bonus on a charisma check. Now, you have to actually have proficiency in that skill to add double your proficiency. Otherwise, you're just doubling 0. But, if there's ever time to make a persuasion check, it was probably when you were dealing with a dragon. You also get Draconic Resilience. I really like this ability. You get an extra 1 hit point per sorcerer level, and that is pretty nice because sorcerers are very squishy. You also get a base 13 armor class due to scales covering your body, 13 plus your dex. And this ability is actually really good, especially at low levels, because mage armor is basically just a fixture in all my arcane casters, especially sorcerer and wizard, because you're just really squishy, and at low levels it's very easy to get killed. However, anybody who's ever used mage armor on a regular basis at low levels knows exactly what I'm talking about here. It kills you a little on the inside every time you realize that one of your only spell slots was sacrificed for mage armor. And I'm not saying it's not worth it. I just finished saying I love mage armor and I use it all the time because I don't want to die. But it does really hurt to lose one of your only spell slots at low level for mage armor. And you don't have to worry about that because you now have mage armor built in automatically. And yeah, at higher levels it's not a big deal really, because if you have a ton of spell slots, then sacrificing a first level spell slot for mage armor every day, no big. But it's still pretty nice because things like shield and absorb elements are also first level spells, and those tend to be other great defensive spells that I like to use a lot. So I actually think that ability is really good, and is one of the more compelling reasons, that and their level 6 ability, to choose the Dragon Ancestor Sorcerer. Level 6, you get Elemental Affinity, the other compelling reason. And that is where you get to add your Charisma mod to damage of the type corresponding with your Dragon Ancestor. So in our previous example, if you chose gold or red, you're going to add your Charisma bonus to fire damage. Now, it only gets applied to 1 die, so if you drop a fireball, kind of like the Evoker Wizard, you only get to add your bonus to 1 of those dice. And if you're using Scorching Ray, you apply it to 1 of those dice, not to all of them. There are advantages and disadvantages between you and the Evoker, though. And like I said, I wanted to go over some of those. The Evoker gets it to all their evocation spells, but it's only for 1st to 5th level. You get to apply it to that chosen damage type, but there's no level restriction. So if you're using like a delayed blast fireball instead of fireball, or an incendiary cloud, or even meteor swarm. I don't know that that extra 5 damage was really going to make the difference on a meteor swarm, and you're already doing like 200. But whatever, it's there anyways. You might as well apply the damage. So I do like it that it applies to a lot of these like higher end damage spells, and kind of gives you an incentive to use those higher level spells. So that is pretty nice actually. And 5 extra damage is definitely nothing to laugh at. You also get, even more if you're able to raise your charisma above 20, of course. You can also spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to the damage type for 1 hour. I'm not saying this ability is bad. It doesn't reuse a reaction, so that's okay, It's only 1 sorcery point. That's not the end of the world. But I kind of feel like this ability could have just been built in for free. You've got races that have resistance to different damage types just built in naturally as part of that race. So I don't think that being a level 6 sorcerer who, permanently had resistance to fire, or cold, or electricity, or lightning, is really a big deal. I also want to mention, when you're choosing your ancestor, I should have mentioned this under the level 1 ability, but whatever, better late than never. Fire has by far the most spells that you can apply that bonus to, and is probably your best choice overall. However, fire is also one of the most commonly resisted and immune damage types in the game, so there is that. So if you want to get away from fire, cold, and lightning are your next best choices, unfortunately there's just not a lot of good acid or poison damage spells. And yeah, there's some, but they're pretty few and far between. You've got a few spells like Draconic Breath and Chromatic Orb, where you can choose an element type. But even still, if you chose cold as your ancestor, you could choose cold on Chromatic Orb as well. So there's no real inherent bonus or advantage to taking acid or cold. Acid or poison. And in general, poison is the most immune damage type of any monster in the monster manual. All the constructs, tons of undead, all immune to poison. Even a lot of like angels and demons and celestials like angels and whatnot. A lot of them end up being immune to poison. And if they're not, they have like ridiculous con saves in general, and poison just ends up not being very good. Wish it wasn't that way, but it is. And I think I'd be doing people a disservice if I didn't at least mention that. That doesn't mean you can't try it. I'm just saying you're kind of like handicapping yourself a little if you do. But hey, some people love a challenge, in which case, poison all the way. Dragon Wings. At level 14, you get the ability to create a pair of dragon wings from your back as a bonus action, and you can dismiss them as a bonus action. And they don't fade with like a long or short rest. They just stay until you dismiss them. And personally, I would just leave them out all the time, unless I was in like some sort of specific, like a court setting where maybe I was worried that the wings might cause me some social issues. But, other than that, just leave wings out, They give you a fly speed equal to your move speed, so if you have a move of 30, you have a fly speed of 30. And that's pretty good. The only caveat is that you can't manifest your wings while wearing armor unless the armor was made to accommodate them. And clothing not made to accommodate your wings might be destroyed when you manifest them. So, if you're going to like Hulk out and shred your clothes every time you transform, the mending cantrip is probably your best friend. I would highly recommend it. On a more serious note though, you might want to talk to your dungeon master. Some people, I personally wouldn't have a problem if you have a robe of the Archmagi and you want to be able to modify it so your wings can come out. I might make you pay gold to go see a specific tailor or do a quest to find this guy who's like the one guy in the kingdom who can actually do it without us losing his property. That could lead to an interesting story. But in general, I'm not going to like tell you, no, you can't use your robe of the Archmagi because you're going to destroy it when you use your wings. And, that's just kind of lame. But talk to your dungeon master first, because some people are kind of crazy about that kind of stuff. So, whatever. At level 18, you get Draconic Presence. This ability is really powerful, but it also costs 5 sorcery points to use, which is a pretty hefty cost. And level 18 is pretty high level to be getting this ability. But still pretty good. As an action, and you spend your 5 sorcery points, you can create either Fear or Awe your choice, and an aura around you up to 60 feet. And that is a huge aura. For 1 minute or until you lose concentration, as if you were casting a concentration spell, each hostile creature that starts its turn in this aura must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be charmed if you chose awe, or frightened if you chose fear, until the aura ends. A creature that succeeds on this saving throw is immune to your aura for 24 hours. Now, I stress hostile because it does somewhat restrict you in aforementioned social situations. Because unless somebody's already hostile, you can't use it. In which case, it's hard to use it subtly, I guess is what I'm saying, right? It's not like a dominate person where you can take the subtlety spell, we'll cover that in a minute, and you can try to charm the king without the rest of the court knowing what's going on. The whole place is going to have to be hostile to you already. Now, maybe you lead out with some mama jokes, or you insult their ancestors, or, spit on their flag or something like that to get them riled up before you use the ability. Whatever. That could lead to some goodwill pulling opportunities there, trying to turn the crowd hostile so that you can use that ability. But in general, be aware that there is that limitation. So that covers the Sorcerer's origin abilities. I wanted to cover some of the meta magics real quick. I'm not going to go into tons of into tons of detail. I was looking at the distant meta magic when I said that, sorry. But we will cover them briefly. And I'll talk about some spells that I think are really good with these different meta magics. So, right off the bat, we'll go in alphabetical order. You have Careful. Spend a sorcery point, and you can exclude a number of creatures up to your charisma bonus from getting hit by your AoE spells. It's not as good as the Evoker one, because in your case, these guys are only going to take half damage. In the Evoker one, they are automatically considered to have passed their saving throw, and if that saving throw gives them half damage, they take none. So, just to make it a little more clear, if you drop a fireball on your frontline paladin barbarian fighter that are all up there fighting the orcs, you can choose them, and they automatically make their saving throw and take half damage. The Evoker Wizard gets to choose them, and they automatically make their saving throw, which would do half damage, but since they get no damage on a successful save, they take no damage for the Evoker. So that one, unfortunately, is a clear win for the Evoker. It's still pretty good, though, because you can use it with things like Web. The Evoker is only using it on damage spells, whereas you get to just, anytime you're using like an AoE, you can use it with Hypnotic Pattern and exclude your allies from being hypnotized, so you don't have to waste a bunch of time trying to shake them all out of their stupor. So I think it's actually better on battlefield controllers. It's not that it's bad on blasters, but it's even better on battlefield controllers. Distant. I'm not saying that this ability is terrible. I mean, we all know that sometimes just doubling up your range is a great thing, but you only have, even at level 20, you've only got like 4 meta magics, I believe. So your choices are very limited, and I just feel like this one's just completely outshone by a lot of the other choices. Empowered. When you roll damage for a spell, you can spend 1 sorcery point to reroll a number of the damage dice up to your charisma modifier, and you must use the new results. You can use Empowered even if you've already used a different meta magic option during the casting of this spell. So that is a nice exception. And it's only 1 sorcery point to reroll up to your charisma bonus worth of dice. So if you drop a fireball and you get a bunch of 1s and 2s, you can just be like, I'm going to take the 5 lowest dice, reroll those 5, and unlike, say, look, the elemental affinity feat where your 1s get treated as 2s, and that helps. It helps to up your average damage a little bit. This can completely swing the damage. You could have a terrible roll that suddenly just became an amazing roll, So, especially on an AoE where you're applying that damage to multiple targets, it can be a big difference. And the fact that you could use it with, say, a Quicken spell makes it even better. It's really the one meta magic where it's good just because you can use it with other meta magics on that same spell. Most of them you can't. So I actually think that if you're going to play a Blaster caster, Empowered is almost always going to be one of my picks. Extend. So you can spend a sorcery point to double the duration of a spell that has a duration of 1 minute or longer. Again, it's not like it's horrible, but it's just outclassed by a lot of the other options. You know, I want to like it because I really like a lot of buff spells, but most combat is going to be, you know, if you change a 1 minute duration into a 2 minute, it's probably going to be over in less than a minute anyways. So it's just really not that great compared to a lot of the other options. Hide the spell. When you cast a spell, it forces the creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects. You can spend 3 sorcery points to give one target of the spell disadvantage on its first saving throw made against that spell. That is fairly pricey, 3 sorcery points, but disadvantage is pretty big. I think the spell, or this ability, sorry, really shines with a lot of these like hard CC spells, right? Like banishment, hold person, etc. And as I've mentioned in other videos, I kind of view those type of spells rather skeptically in general. I don't really like the idea that if they make the saving throw, I've used a spell slot and my action and I've done absolutely nothing. You know, that's a pretty high price to pay for 0 results. But given the target disadvantage, suddenly makes something like a hold monster or a hold person or a banishment much more likely to land. I do want to stress though that it's only the one target, so if you're using like a fireball, you don't get to give everybody in the fireball disadvantage. It's only the one guy, and that's still okay if you got like the one boss mob and he's got like a bunch of minions around him. You can just give him disadvantage, and if the minions live or die, whatever, right? You're just still damaging them and just doing as much as you can. So it's not terrible, but I think it shines a little more on the controller aspect rather than the blaster aspect. But still good for both. Quicken spell. When a spell has a casting time of 1 action, you can spend 2 sorcery points to change it to 1 bonus action. Quicken spell is absolutely amazing, and it's even better on melee caster, like Sorcerer, Paladin type hybrid type classes. We'll talk about that towards the end. Getting to use like your full complement of Paladin attacks and dropping some smites on guys, and then quicken casting a full spell on top of that all in the same round is amazing. The problem with, as a blaster caster, is that if I use this to quicken cast a spell, the only spell I can now cast with my actual action has to be a cantrip. And that's not the worst thing in the world, you know, I can quicken cast a fireball and then follow it up with a fire blast, or a firebolt, sorry. You know, that's okay, but it's even better on the melee guys. So I would say like it's a 10 out of 10 on melee sorcerer hybrid type guys. It's an 8 out of 10 on, you know, your blaster caster. I do think it gets overrated though, because we sometimes treat it like it's still a 9 or a 10, and it's like, it's amazing, don't get me wrong, it's just not quite as good as it is on some others. Still an amazing choice. Subtle spell. This spell is not great for blasters, but it is amazing on like party face type guys, right? If you want to like dominate the king, like I said earlier, without letting the rest of the court know what's going on, you just subtle cast it. It's only 1 sorcery point, no verbal or somatic components, and you know, now nobody even knows that you cast a spell. Twin spell. This one is pretty good. It does get a little pricey. It costs 1 sorcery point per level of the spell being twinned. So if you're twinning like a Finger of Death, you're looking at 7 sorcery points. Kind of pricey. 1 if it's a cantrip. The spell must be incapable of targeting more than 1 creature at the spell's current level. So, you know, if you cast Scorching Ray, it specifically says this is not eligible, same with Fireball, etc. Hold Person, if you upscale it, not eligible. But if you cast it at a 2nd level spell, it is eligible, because it says it has to be at the spell's current level. So, not bad, but I think it really, really shines when you can start using things like haste and targeting 2 guys, polymorph and targeting 2 guys. Like, that's where it really, really starts to really prove its worth. So as we all know, twinned is excellent, but it is very expensive as well. So those are my thoughts on most of that. So I do want to mention a few particularly good combinations with things like Heighten. I mentioned Banishment, Hold Personal, Hold Monster, but also Polymorph if you're planning to use it as like a debuff. It's quite good. Um, and things like Disintegrate, Finger Death, these like big damage single target spells, giving a target disadvantage is quite good. Be aware though that a lot of things at those levels have legendary saves, so giving a disadvantage won't do anything. It's just going to make the saving throw anyways. Twin, I thought of a couple. Obviously, there's things like haste and greater invisibility, like we know. Polymorph already mentioned. Being able to twin, Disintegrate, and Figure Death is pretty good. I came up with a weird idea though while I was looking through the spellbook, which was flame arrows. If you had, like, say, like a ranger and an arcane archer in your party, and then maybe you have a barbarian in the front line, being able to cast flame arrows on both those guys is pretty good because you should get to add your charisma bonus to the damage that they're dealing, and now you've got two guys dealing it. So I kind of like that combo. You need two ranged guys using bows or crossbows. That's not always going to be available, but you know, just when I was looking at it, I was like, man, if you went fire and took that, that could be all right. I want to mention a couple of the multi-class options. I already mentioned Paladin. Paladin, we might as well start there because that's one of the best. And I think with Draconic, you've got a couple particularly interesting options. One of these is Green Flame Blade, because if you're dealing fire damage, if you chose gold or red Ancestry, you're able to deal that damage with your +5 charisma bonus on top of your Green Flame Blade. And that is pretty good. Unfortunately, you can't do it with Booming Blade because it's thunder damage, not lightning damage. I don't know why thunder and lightning are different kinds of damage even, to be honest. I mean, yes, I know thunder is the sound, lightning is the electricity, but I mean, it could have simplified it and just combined it into one. Nobody would have cared. But whatever. It's very unfortunate because you can actually twin a Booming Blade, but you can't twin a Green Flame Blade because Green Flame Blade hits an extra target. So, you know, I mean, you would have been able to have some really interesting combos there, but whatever. Still pretty good. I think that, like, quicken touching a Vampiric Touch on, like, a Paladin Sorcerer multiclass becomes very, very nice. It gives you a bit of extra damage. You're already in melee combat. It gives you a bit of self-healing because you're on the front line. I don't think Vampiric Touch is a very good spell usually, but on this type of character, it becomes quite nice. And one of the really nice things about combining Sorcerer with the Dragon Ancestry is that because Green Flame Blade gets to do quite a bit of damage if you choose fire, and you will choose fire for this combo, it really means that these like Paladin 2 Sorcerer all the rest of the way builds become pretty competitive. Like, yeah, you've only got one attack a round instead of two like you would with a higher level Paladin build, but if you're just going to cast Green Flame Blade and then maybe quicken the odd Green Flame Blade and, you know, conserve your spell slots a little more, drop some smites here and there, but be more of a caster, but just wear plate mail and use a shield maybe and, you know, dropping some smites every now and then I think it's very, very potent. If you want to take more Paladin levels though, then obviously Paladin 6 for your aura protection means you're going to lose out on your high level sorcerer spells, and you'll lose out on your 18th level sorcerer ability. But you could be a Paladin 6, Sorcerer 14, still have wings, and fly around in plate mail while having +5 bonus to all your saving throws from your aura. 2 attacks around still, it's pretty potent. Depending on what you want to take, like going 7 for, like, say if you went Oath of the Ancients, obviously the Aura of Warding is insanely good. And I think like Oath of Conquest is pretty good as well. You could take like the Careful spell, use things like Fear, which is a, you know, cone, exclude your allies from it, and fear a bunch of enemies, and then just lock them down inside your Fear aura. And instead of them running around and have to chase them down, you just start beating on them as they just cower before you. Just the mere thought of that is so epic. I love it. I also think if you wanted to take like Animate Dead, or maybe you have a Necromancer in your party, which is going to be even better, then the Oathbreaker Paladin and their level 7 aura, where you get to add the charisma bonus to like your undead summons. Your necromancer buddy adding your +5 charisma bonus to all of his undead summons. You cast Enemy Dead yourself maybe, and everybody in that 10-foot aura just laying on the minions, all getting extra damage. Again, pretty awe-inspiring. So I do think that those are some really good combos. You can even go Paladin 8 if you really need the extra feat. It does mean that you're going to lose out on your 7th level Sorcerer spells, and I start to feel like that's a pretty hefty commitment. But, you know, whatever, it's still pretty decent. Bard 6 is pretty good. Either one, really. If you wanted to go, well, any of them, really. If you wanted to go with the melee focused, like College of Valor or the College of Blades, get that second attack around, get a few armor options, maybe even a fighting style, depending on what one you took. Decent. College of Lore to pick up a couple of your Bardic Secrets, there we go, is pretty good. Just adding a couple great spells to your spell list, nothing wrong with that. I think that Warlock 2 or 3 is pretty good. I mean, you could make an argument for Hexblade and just take one level of Warlock, but I actually think that if you wanted to go the melee route, I feel like the Paladin is bringing a lot more. For one thing, Paladin 2 becomes a pretty good option. With Warlock, you're going to need at least 5 levels to get Smite, and if you're going 5 levels of Warlock, you could have just gone 6 levels of Paladin, had that extra attack, had the smites, and had Aura of Protection. Plus, you start with Plate Mail instead of medium armor. I just feel like that one's probably going to be the stronger mix. This is definitely more the Blaster caster. You can take, you know, a couple levels of Warlock, get Agonizing Blast, and, you know, use a lot of Agonizing Blast for just your single target damage. And then when you want the AoE damage, that's when you're using your Dragon Blood Ancestry, you're using your Fire or your Cold, or maybe your Lightning if you took, like, you know, Chain Lightning and the Lightning Bolt and stuff like that. And I think that ends up being a pretty good mix. I kind of like Warlock 2, honestly. I don't know that you really need the Warlock 3 abilities, but, you know, they're there, and if you want them, by all means. It does mean you're going to lose out on your wings eventually, but, you know, that's assuming your campaign even goes all the way to 20. Most don't. Fighter 1, or even Fighter 2 for Action Surge, but really just Fighter 1, offers a lot. You can start with Plate Mail Armor. Nothing wrong with that, that's for sure. A bonus action heal isn't bad. Yeah, it's not going to scale because you're going to be mostly Sorcerer levels. But with that one extra hit point per level, I do feel like you could be kind of a melee type of guy if you really wanted to. I feel like with this one, though, I'm probably going to just be a Blaster caster. I'm just going to do it while wearing Plate Mail and using a shield, maybe. And just being as hard as possible, hard to hit as possible, and try to preserve that concentration saving throw. Along similar line, Life Cleric 1 is a pretty good mix as well. And one of the nice things is, as a sorcerer, you start with proficiency on con saves. And so it kind of entices me to start as sorcerer, even on some of these other multi-classes. With Life Cleric, unlike, say, Paladin or Fighter, if you start as a sorcerer and then multi-class, you don't actually get heavy armor. You're going to get medium armor. With the Life Cleric, because heavy armor is a bonus proficiency, you could go to 5 or 6 levels of sorcerer, get your 3rd level spells, get your elemental affinity, and then grab a level of Life Cleric. It's going to give you a few more spell options. It's not going to slow your spell casting progression down by a lot, and you're going to get the heavy armor. And, you know, that's actually pretty decent. So those are, I think, some of the best ones for multi-classing. Of course, there's always tons of other options. That's one of the great things about 5th edition, is that there's really just not a lot of bad choices to be made. And as long as you kind of give things a bit of thought and planning in advance, you're probably going to be all right. Anyways, those are basically my thoughts on the class. I don't see the point of going on much longer about them. I think we've kind of covered everything I want to talk about. So feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and most importantly, as I always say, leave your comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear about your sorcerer experiences and things that you've done. There are some crazy combos that you can pull off with meta magic, and I'm sure there's a million different things I haven't even thought of, different spells that the people have twinned or quicken casted or subtly casted in this circumstance for great effect. And I love to read those kind of stories and ideas. So I will see you next time in the dungeon.